My dear Cassandra, your letter was a most agreeable surprise to me today, and I have taken a long sheet of paper to show my gratitude. We arrived here yesterday between 4 and 5, but I cannot send you quite so triumphant an account of our last day's journey as of the first and second. Soon after I had finished my letter from Staines, my mother began to suffer from the exercise and fatigue of traveling so far, and she was a good deal indisposed from that particular kind of evacuation which has generally preceded her illness. She had not had a very good night at Staines, and felt a heat in her throat as we travelled yesterday morning, which seemed to foretell more bile. She bore her journey, however, much better than I expected, and at Basingstoke, where we stopped more than half an hour, received much comfort from a mess of broth and the sight of Mr. Lyford, who recommended her take 12 drops of laudanum when she went to bed as a composer, which she accordingly did. It is by no means wonderful that her journey should have produced some kind of visitation. I hope a few days will entirely remove it. James called on us just as we were going to tea, and my mother was well enough to talk cheerfully to him before she went to bed. Lyford has promised to call in the course of a few days, and then they will settle about the dandelion tea, the receipts for which were shown him at Basingstoke, and he approved of them highly. They will only require some slight alteration to be better adapted to my mother's constitution. James seems to have taken to his old trick of coming to Steventon, in spite of Mary's reproaches, for he was here before breakfast, and is now paying us a second visit. Mary is quite well, he says, and uncommonly large. They were to have dined here today, but the weather is too bad. I have had the pleasure of hearing that Martha is with them. James fetched her from Ibthorp on Thursday. She will stay with them till she removes to Kintbury. We met with no adventures at all on our journey yesterday, except that our trunk had once nearly slipped off, and we were obliged to stop at Hartley to have our wheels greased. While my mother and Mr. Lyford were together, I went to Mrs. Ryder's and bought what I had intended to buy, but not in much perfection. There were no narrow braces for children, and scarcely any netting silk, but Miss Wood, as usual, is going to town very soon, and will lay in a fresh stock. I gave 2s. 3d. a yard for my flannel, and I fancy it is not very good, but it is so disgraceful and contemptible an article in itself that its being comparatively good or bad is of little importance. I bought some Japan ink likewise, and next week shall begin my operations on my hat, on which you know my principal hopes of happiness depend. I am very grand indeed. I had the dignity of dropping out my mother's laudanum last night. I carry about the keys of the wine and closet, and twice since I began this letter have had orders to give into the kitchen. Our dinner was very good yesterday, and the chicken boiled perfectly tender. Therefore I shall not be obliged to dismiss Nanny on that account. Almost everything was unpacked and put away last night. Nanny chose to do it, and I was not sorry to be busy. I have unpacked the gloves and placed yours in your drawer. Their color is light and pretty, and I believe exactly what we fixed on. Your letter was chaperoned here by one from Mrs. Cook, in which she says that Batteridge is not to come out before January. She is so little satisfied with Cawthorn's dilatoriness that she never means to employ him again. Mrs. Hall of Sherborne was brought to bed yesterday of a dead child, some weeks before she expected, owing to a fright. I suppose she happens unawares to look at her husband. There has been a great deal of rain here for the last fortnight, much more than in Kent, and indeed we found the roads all the way from Staines most disgracefully dirty. Steventon Lane has had its full share of it, and I do not know when I shall be able to get to Dane. I hear that Martha is in better looks and spirits than she has enjoyed for a long time, and I flatter myself she will now be able to jest openly about Mr. W. The spectacles which Molly found are my mother's, and the scissors my father's. We are glad to hear such a good account of your patients, little and great. My dear Edie Doherty's remembrance of me is very pleasing to me, foolishly pleasing, because I know it will be over soon. My attachment to him will be more durable. I shall think with tenderness and delight of his beautiful and smiling countenance and interesting manners, till a few years have turned him into an ungovernable, ungracious fellow. The books from the Winstons are all unpacked and put away. The binding has compressed them most conveniently, and there is now very good room in the bookcase for all that we wish to have there. I believe the servants were very glad to see us. Nanny was, I am sure. She confesses that it is very dull, and yet she had her child with her till last Sunday. I understand that there are some grapes left, but I believe not many. They must be gathered as soon as possible, or this rain will entirely rot them. I am quite angry at myself for not writing closer. Why is my alphabet so much more sprawled than yours? Dame Tilbury's daughter-in-law has lain in. Shall I give her any of your baby clothes? The lace man was here only a few days ago. How unfortunate for us both that he came so soon. Dame Cashel washes for us only 1 week more, as Sookie has got a place. John Stevens's wife undertakes purification. She does not look as if anything she touched would ever be cleaned, but who knows? We do not seem likely to have any other maid servant at present, but Dame Staples will supply the place of one. May has hired a young girl from Ash, who has never been put out to service, to be her scrub. James fears her not being strong enough for the place. Earl Haywood has been to Dean lately, as I think Mary wrote us word, and his family then told him that they would receive his wife, if she continued to behave well for another year. He was very grateful, as well he might. Their behavior throughout the whole affair has been particularly kind. Earl and his wife live in the most private manner imaginable at Portsmouth, without keeping a servant of any kind. What a prodigious innate love of virtue she must have to marry under such circumstances. It is now Saturday evening, but I wrote the chief of this morning. My mother has not been down all day. Laudanum made her sleep a good deal, and upon the whole I think she is better. I shall be able to be more positive on the subject, I hope, tomorrow. My father and I dined by ourselves. How strange! He and John Bond are now very happy together, for I have heard heavy footsteps of the latter down along the passage. James Digweed called today, and I gave him his brother's deputation. Charles Haywood, too, has just called to ask how we are, in his way from Dummer, whether he has been converting Miss Garrett, who's going to return to her former residence in Kent. I will leave off, or I shall not have room to add a word tomorrow. Sunday. My mother has had a very good night, and though she did not get up for breakfast, feels much better today. I have received my aunt's letter, and thank you for your scrap. I will write to Charles soon. Pray give Fanny and Edward a kiss from me, and ask George if he has got a new song for me. 'Tis really very kind in my aunt to ask both of us to Bath again, a kindness that deserves a much better return than to profit by it. Yours ever, J.A.